Good evening all, and welcome. For those of you who don't know, I have a second YouTube channel, where I openly display my face if you'd like to see it. On that channel, I talk a lot about the upcoming mobile game Wizards Unite, which we've just got our first teaser trailer for, and it looks pretty cool. So if you're into all things Harry Potter, or wizarding stuff, it would really mean a lot to me if you could please go over to my tiny little other channel, check it out, and please subscribe. I'm trying to hit the 1,000 subscriber threshold and 4,000 hours watch time so that YouTube can monetize my mini channel too, which would certainly be nice. Again, no one's obligated, and if you don't want to see what I look like, then don't click the link because that's exactly what you'll be doing. I'll leave a link at the very top of the description, just after the little bit of text, and I'll leave it on the card at the very end of the video, the other logo. You can't miss it. But anyway, without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Since as long as I can remember, the house I grew up in was haunted. Let me give you a bit of background information. When my parents first met, they moved to a quiet suburban town to get away from all the noise, hustle and bustle from the city. It was their dream to open a B&B of sorts, but when they found an opportunity to purchase a vintage pub, they jumped at it. They spent months renovating, redoing, and pouring all their heart and soul into that pub. And was it worth it? It was a huge hit with the town, and everybody enjoyed going. Me and my siblings were born a few years later, when their pub was in full swing and doing fantastically well. Everyone knew us because we were the kids of the pub owners. But the pub had something mysterious and creepy to it that my parents didn't like to bring up. I assume it was because, in their minds, the pub was perfect, and they didn't want anything that could potentially tarnish it. Now, just so that you understand, our house was connected to the pub, but also had a fairly big space behind it, so we all managed to live there comfortably. My parents would bartend during the evening and night, and as me and my siblings got older, we would also help out, and honestly, we had a great time. Now, the hauntings themselves started to happen after I was about 3 years old, and now that I'm older, speaking to my mother, she tells me that all of this started after someone died in their pub, as before, i.e. when they were doing it up and living there as just a married couple, there was nothing. This all happened because of Barry, apparently. Barry was a hopeless alcoholic. He would spend his days working hard as the head of a small construction company in our town. At the end of every day, without fail, he would trot over to the pub and have many drinks. He'd usually leave to the point where he couldn't even stand up, and more often than not, my parents would have to get a taxi to take him home. It was quite sad, really. He was relatively successful, but clearly self-destructive. After a few years, when I was about 2, I think, that's when something happened. He was in the pub having his usual drinks, when he just slumped onto the table. No one paid any mind you. Everyone thought he was just asleep, and left it at that. But when it came to closing time, Barry hadn't seemed to move. So my mother went over and told him to be on his way. She put her hand on his shoulder and tried shaking him, and thought he was feeling a little cold. That's when she realized Barry wasn't breathing. No one had noticed, but Barry had passed. Lots of people suspected liver poisoning or something like that. But it turns out he had an undiagnosed cancer. Maybe he just didn't want to tell anyone and wanted to keep drinking. And he died there, in the corner of my parents' pub. Since his death, that's when all the weird stuff started happening. The pub was obviously closed around 3 AM, and this is when the bulk of the activity seemed to happen. We would wake up some mornings, my dad would go downstairs to check, maybe to do some tidying up or organising, and there would be glasses just out on tables. Bear in mind that when my parents close up for the night, they always clean everything up. They usually mop in the mornings though. And they were sure they hadn't left glasses out. So this happened from time to time. Not frequently, but enough to make it a nuisance when it did happen, and thoroughly creep us out. Between us kids, we would all laugh and giggle, and run and check almost as if it were a joke, to see if Barry the ghost had done anything else. Sometimes the broom or mop would be lying on the floor. Things would go missing, like keys, important documents, and the like, right when we needed them. For example, my sister put her note down on the table that she needed for a field trip, and right before my dad drove her to school, the note was gone. Now my dad could have easily written another one, but this pissed him off because he was running out of time and had a crap load of stuff to do. They looked around. It couldn't be found. Not 2 weeks later, one morning after my dad was mopping the floors, he found the note inside a beer glass. No one knows to this day how it got there, but everyone said it was Barry because he didn't want her to go on the trip. Mind you, on that trip in particular, she told her crush that she liked him, and she was very deflated when she was told by him that he wasn't interested. Perhaps he was trying to protect her. Who knows? After a few years though, stuff started to escalate. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and feel something running down my spine, like a cold breath. I wouldn't want to turn around, I wouldn't want to move. And at some points in the middle of the night, the noises, the creaks, the breaths, and the feel of cold skin against my body would petrify me to the point I thought I was actually going to die. I can't describe the fear that I felt in that house sometimes. Sure, by morning, Barry would be a joke, but in the dead of night, I found it utterly terrifying. All of this is just the tip of the iceberg though, because things really started to hit the fan as we got older. I suppose we were all about 16, 15 at this point. We were all having our teenage issues, being hormonal, what you will. And my brother had already started working in the pub. He was quite good at it as well, and my parents were really pleased by this, because in their minds, he could very well take over the family business when they decided it was time to retire. My parents had just kicked everybody out. It was late. They'd closed a little bit later than usual because it was someone's birthday party. I remember that quite well. It had been a jolly occasion, and even us girls had come down to partake in the celebration, which is something we wouldn't usually do on a school night anyway. So, we were all cleaning up together. My dad, my mum and I are all just reminiscing about how great the night was, while my sister and brother are clearing up in another part of the pub. When out of nowhere, a glass is thrown from the counter towards my face. It misses me by inches. I can't describe how terrifying that was. My parents both saw it, and we were all in shock. The sound alerted my siblings, and they ran over and demanded to know what happened. We explained that, although unbelievable, a cup had just been flung by seemingly nothing and almost hit my face. We were all pretty scared. My dad didn't know what to do, so he told us all to just drop everything and get back into the house. We did. Next morning, when we woke up, we were all eager to go downstairs and see if anything had happened. As we reached the top of the stairs, as we had to go downstairs to get to this particular part of the pub, we were all terrified. None of us wanted to go down first. And the stairs going down into the dark corridor before the pub were frightening, to say the least. My dad went forward, flicked the light on, and slowly approached the door. We all stayed huddled at the top of the stairs as he pushed it open and said, "Oh shit." When he said that, we all assumed it was safe, but bad, and we ran down the stairs, eager to see what carnage the ghost had caused. He had destroyed about 8 different glasses, a few empty bottles, and also, for some reason, flooded part of the floor with beer. That was nice of him. All of us stood there, but my dad just said that it was time to clean it up and for us to try not to think about it. And that's what we did. We told it to all our friends at school, who didn't believe us. About a week later, my dad came home and said that he had talked to a priest and he wanted to have the pub blessed. My mum, being completely non-religious, laughed the whole thing off and said he was mad. But my dad and her started arguing, and nonetheless, the priest came around 1 week later. He walked into a pub. Funny that he hadn't actually been here before, to be honest. And he said a few prayers, sprinkled some holy water, and went on his way. It didn't seem to do much. It did calm it down for a little while, to be fair, and we thought it was the end of it. But after about 2 weeks, everything came back to normal, and seemingly with a vengeance. We would wake up to glass bottles being thrown on the ground, broken. Sometimes there'd be a puddle of beer on the floor, which wasn't fun. But most importantly, and most terrifyingly, was the final encounter. This happened near closing time, and there were a couple of people out of town just finishing their drinks. They seemed nice enough. A guy and a girl. The guy looks over to me, inquisitively asks why we hadn't approached the guy in the corner about closing time, asking me who he was, saying he's seen him all night and that he hadn't ordered anything or moved, and he wasn't sure if he was okay. I look over to the corner he's referring to, and of course, there's no one there. So I look back at him and say, "Which corner, sir? I don't know where you're looking at." He points directly at Larry's corner, which is what we affectionately nicknamed it, and I see nothing. His girlfriend then chimes in, "I don't see anyone," and we all give each other a confused look. I decide that since they're out of town, I'll let them in on this little bit of information and explain the whole Larry story. They listen with eager ears and are getting pretty creeped out. The guy has only a smidge of alcohol left in his glass and says after I finish recounting the tale that he'll have his drink and they'll be on their way. Just before his hand can reach the glass, it's smashed out by an invisible force and hits the floor hard. And then we all hear it. We hear a soft grunt right behind us. We turn around freaked out, but of course, it's a wall. There's no one there. Those two people were out of that pub faster than I'd ever seen anybody run. The girl actually almost slipped on a little bit of spilt beer, and they forgot to pay their tab, but I don't blame them. They never came back. After I told my dad that, he said once and for all that he was going to try the priest one more time. My mum, even more skeptical now, overruled my dad and said it would be pointless. So, my dad stood up in the middle of the pub once it was closed and started shouting, "Larry, you're dead, mate. Thanks for all your service when you were here, but you need to either stop dicking around or go. My kids and my customers are going nuts over this, so make your choice or make your peace." After that, we never had anything happen again. It was an interesting few years living with a ghost, but I am glad that they finally managed to rid of him, or at least perceived to be rid of him. After he was gone, nothing strange happened in the house. I went to college and moved out, and only really go back when I go see them for the holidays, and nothing creepy has happened since. I asked my mum before just to check, and she said that it's been fine ever since my dad confronted him. Part of me feels a little bit sad that Larry was so attached to the pub that he decided to stay here and couldn't move on. But at least he stopped haunting my parents' pub, and things were a lot better after that. My house is thankfully not haunted, but my parents' house, a circa 70s-60s cape in Seaside, Maine, is actively haunted. My mum's been keeping a little journal of every inexplicable thing that's happened in the house since they moved there 12 years ago. Late last year, I was sitting by the fireplace and started reading through the journal. Holy shit, it would give Paranormal Activity a solid run for its money. I've experienced several bizarre things in the house, but I was in college when they bought it, and never moved home after, only visited, so my exposure was always limited. The one most striking incident for me happened the winter after they'd moved in. I was a sophomore in college, and had come home from college for the holidays. It was cold as hell, being Maine, so my sister, who I think was something like 15 at the time, and I were sharing a bed in one of the big downstairs front rooms, the room that is now my parents' master bedroom. All of our other siblings were away from home, aside from my younger brother, who was in the far back corner wing of the house, and my parents were both at work, so the house was entirely quiet. Perhaps that's why a fairly subtle sound, a gasped breath, awoke me from sound sleep so violently. I lay startled for a moment, fumbling at the cloudy subconscious threads of what had disturbed me, when I heard it again. Now I've been on Reddit a while, and I love these creepy threads. It was on a similar thread, something about "what's the scariest sound you've ever heard?", where I finally found an audio recording similar to what I heard on that frosty morning a decade ago. It was a death rattle, which, if you're feeling ballsy, by all means look up. It's not for the faint of heart, but that is exactly what it sounded like. At the time, I had not wandered down such dark internet alleys, and just thought, holy shit, Erin, my little sister, has one hell of a cold. I was still lying as I had awoken on my side, with my back to my sleeping sister, and the sound, which came every 10 seconds or so, though irregularly, sounded like it was coming from inches from my ear, maybe a little lower somehow. After a minute or so, I decided to wake my sister up. She sounded sick enough that I was getting worried that she was having actual breathing problems. I rolled over to a shocking sight. Erin wide awake, staring straight back at me. She urgently whispered, "That's not you?" And as if in defiant answer, the noise gurgled even louder this time. From the space directly between us, like jackrabbits, we both leapt out of bed and then stood still, our feet arching against the cold wood floors, listening hard. The sound kept coming. We knelt under the bed. We listened at the old windows, the chimney, the keeping room to the back of the bedroom. No, it was without a doubt coming from the bed, from the center of the bed. After they hastily search, we both stood by the bed once more and stared at each other in amazed silence. Across the rumpled sheets, an old worn quilt. At the center of the mattress, the sound still wetly rolling up from its still sleep-warm center. And then it choked and ceased abruptly. Now you either believe in ghosts or you don't. I'm not here to sell you anything one way or another. What I will tell you is that the same holiday break, I dug into the history of the home. It was built around 1760 by the Eatons, and descended in that family for the next 100 years, before becoming a rooming house in 1865. Between 1820 and 1830, John Eaton and his wife Sally, and 7 of their 9 children died in the house. John died first in 1821, of what was likely a bleeding ulcer. The next oldest male, a son, did not die in the house, but was lost at sea shortly after. Sally and the 7 children were left in likely very tiring circumstances in that house. Then, in quick, heart-beatingly quick succession, the rest began dying one after another. Sally and the 6 little children died of consumption, which of course we now know as tuberculosis. Charles, the second eldest son, was the only survivor of what had been a large and robust family only 10 years ago. He packed up and moved out west to Kansas, if I recall. And Christ on a cupcake, who could blame the poor guy? Happiness or luck, or longevity, were not waiting for him there. Though he died in 1856, still a young man by all accounts. Weird things kept happening in my daughter's room. Every pet she had, that is in her room, would end up dying. I know pets always end up dying anyway, but hers died a lot quicker than usual. She had several fish randomly die. She had a turtle that just died about a month after we bought it. She even had a bird that died 2 weeks after. I just always find some sort of explanation for them, but it still creeps me out. When her bird died, I was out of town. But when I got back, my sister told me what happened the night before they found it dead. My sister, nephew, and my mum were all downstairs just hanging out, when they all heard my daughter run down the stairs saying something was in her closet. Of course, they tell her that no one is up there. Then they heard someone laugh from the room. So my sister gets a flashlight and a gun to go check it out. No one's there. The next morning when my daughter woke up, the bird was dead. Besides the animals dying, sometimes things just randomly fall in her room too. She used to have a snow globe that would out of nowhere start playing music on its own. No one had touched it in months, and it would just start up. It eventually ended up falling down and shattering when no one was home. We still hear stuff every now and then, coming from the room. But we just ignore it and pretend we found some kind of explanation. When I was about 10 to 11 years old, I lived in this house that I knew was haunted, and would ask my mum at least once a week if she thought it was, but she would always deny it and say she didn't know. I'm 21 now, and she told me 2 years ago that it actually was haunted. She just didn't want me to be scared. She even agreed with me when I said that I'd always felt watched in the house, and that stuff was randomly missing. Anyway, one night I woke up, and the only light in my room was from the street light through the window. So I could see somewhat in my room, but it was still pretty dark. My computer and chair were on the other side of the room, with the window between us, so it was darker over there than anywhere else in the room. I used to sleep facing the wall, so that night I decided to roll over just to see if I could fall back asleep in a different position. But when I rolled over and looked at my chair, I saw what looked like a demon or something sitting in it. I completely froze mid-roll over, and I was just staring straight at this dark figure in the chair, not daring to move. I could only see the dark outline of it, but I could tell it was adult size and basically way bigger than me. Jesus, my hands are sweating just saying this. The only thing I could see of this thing in my chair were the eyes. They looked dark red, like rubies. My eyes started to water, so I started praying. I prayed for what seemed like half an hour, just laying there and staring into the eyes of whatever I thought it was. After I finished praying, through tears I said, "Please leave me alone. I don't want to die. I just want to sleep." Then I covered my head with my pillow and figured if I stayed under the pillow, then it would leave me alone. Kid logic, right? I fell asleep, and when I woke up, there was nothing in the chair, and my chair was facing towards me, except I always pushed it under my desk. Extra story. I would always come home after school, and I would be alone. One day when I got back from school, I thought I saw a hand waving at me through the kitchen window, near the side door. So I went there and got 3 of my friends to go in there with me. Us being young boys, we thought we could take whatever/whoever was in there if we had a weapon. So we had a bat, 2 brooms and a mop. We walked through this side door through the kitchen and into the living room, and as soon as we got into the living room, we heard a loud bang from my mum and stepdad's room. So we all dropped our weapons and ran. When my stepdad got home, he didn't believe me, so I got my arse whooped for having my friends over without asking, and leaving everything in the living room. Thanks, ghost. When I was in middle school, I was invited to a big sleepover/birthday party at my friend's house. There were 12 of us in total, doing the normal sleepover thing. Talk about boys, fight over which band was better, NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys, and play MASH. Around 10 PM, we decided that scary stories were the best thing to discuss. The birthday girl goes first and explains that her house was built on an old cemetery, or next to one, I never really found out, but the house was very old and part of it was once a church. She also said that it was haunted. None of us believed her, but we went along with it. She said that things would move around, plates and cups would stack in the center of the kitchen floor. The chairs would be stacked on the tables and towers, voices and basically everything from any scary movie I had ever seen. Around midnight, her parents come in to say goodnight and tell us not to stay up too late, but there was extra cake and ice cream if we did. They were awesome parents. 12:30, the birthday girl wants more cake and snacks, so we all trot down the hall to the kitchen when we hear plates and kitchen drawers moving. Thinking it's her parents setting out dishes, we walk into the kitchen to see cups, saucers and bowls stacked in the center of the kitchen floor. We look at each other, freaked out, but thinking it could be the parents playing a joke. The birthday girl gets her parents, and her mum is very upset, and her dad looks worried, but tells us everything is fine and that we need to go back to bed. Before we can go back to her room, a cabinet door opens and we see bowls and more cups fly out across the kitchen. Her mum screams and grabs the birthday girl and pushes all of us into the bathroom in the hallway, while her dad's screaming, "You coward, why don't you show yourself?" He said other things too, but they were muffled by the door. But it was along the lines of, "Don't pick on little girls. I will get a priest. Leave my family alone." After this, we were all crying and scared, and we went home. A few years later they moved out. The place never sells, and it mysteriously burnt down one night during a storm. I have another story too. It involves my two brothers. They both shared a room next to mine. My youngest brother at the time was 5 to 6 years old, and he was always afraid of storms and would sometimes sleep in my room or get into my bed if he was scared during a storm. My bed was pushed up against a wall, so only one side was accessible. You know, more room for activities. One night I was asleep in my room, my youngest brother in his room alone, and my other brother was at a Boy Scouts event, when I hear someone opening my door. I thought it was my brother, and I didn't open my eyes. I just instinctively moved over in bed. That's when I heard my name being whispered. Only once, but directly in my ear. I swear I could feel warm breath on my face and in my ear. It was a young boy's voice, but not my brother's. I remember the panic that spread over me, but I was frozen in fear as I opened my eyes. I looked around, but no one was there, and my door was closed. After a few minutes, I decided to check to see if my brother was in bed. He was in bed, completely asleep, with the room littered with toys, and there's no way of walking through that without kicking something or making a noise that would alert me. I never heard the voice again, but I did sleep with the lamp on for a few nights. In one of my childhood homes, the previous owner's son told me that there was a myth that an old lady, the original owner, died in one of the bedrooms, and they found her days later. When we moved in, I chose that room as mine, because if I didn't sleep there every day, I would be afraid to enter. The floors were hardwood and original, and there was an odd stain in one section of the floor. I figured someone had accidentally used too much wood stain. Beyond that, the room was perfectly ordinary. For years, odd stuff happened in that house. I would come home alone to find every door perpendicular to its frame. Lights would flick on and off, and I'd hear two people having conversations when I was supposed to be alone. I'd check to see if my parents were home early from whatever, only to find the room empty, and the lights had turned themselves on. This happened to my other family members as well, not just me. Once my father called me at school. He asked if I was home because he heard voices and he was the only person there. We all figured that we were all just going crazy. The creepiest of it all was years later. I was watching a show called Taboo, where they discuss odd jobs and stuff. One was about the guy who cleans up after crime scenes. Lo and behold, he's cleaning up the stain of a body that's left behind on hardwood floors after it's been sitting there a while. After he was done, the floor was left with the exact same stain pattern I had in my room all along. That made everything that happened in that house all the more unsettling. Both myself and my stepsister used to get off work late at night, anywhere from 11 to 1 a.m. By that time, everyone in the house was asleep. Every once in a while, I would get home from work. I would see what looked like a silhouette of a man in stereotypical 1950s gangster clothes standing on my porch, zoot suit, fedora and all. I always played it off as just seeing things. Then one night, I walked inside and saw this figure walking through my living room to my kitchen. A few weeks later, while home alone, I was using the bathroom and heard a very distinct cough from the hallway. It ran along the side of the bathroom, and I immediately stopped and checked my whole house. Nothing. There was no one there but me. Finally, one day, I mentioned this to my stepsister, and she confirmed that she had had and seen similar things. When we told my mum about it, and she mentioned that she had bought an old trunk at an estate sale with clothes matching our description inside it. She had sold all of this stuff recently, and we didn't have any strange experiences since, after she'd sold the stuff. I didn't believe in the paranormal before, but damn, that was too hard to explain away. I am a junior in college, and whenever I think about this incident or tell the story, it still makes me shake like it happened yesterday. A little bit of background. I grew up in a haunted house. There was an incident where a bucket flew across the room and almost hit me. Something grabbed my leg while I was doing my hair in the bathroom, and different stuff like that. On top of that, I've also seen things like shadow people, and friends have too. And emotionally, dang. That environment was toxic, just dark. I don't know how to explain it. While I had experienced different things growing up, when I got into early high school, things really escalated. And by the time this story happens, it was the beginning of my senior year, and it was the worst of it. When I was a junior in high school, I mainly binged shows and did homework. I didn't do a whole lot, mainly because I didn't have my car or a license. My life basically consisted of TV, homework, being a small group leader on Wednesdays for a youth group, and a leader for kids ministry on Sundays. That's it. I have a big family, and at this point my 3 eldest siblings had moved out, so it was just me, my twin, and my parents. I was used to always having someone in the house, but not this time. We lived way out in the country of northwestern Pennsylvania. My twin sister let me know that she had to leave school early so that she could drive and cover shift for work. My dad worked about an hour away from the house, so he wouldn't be home until 7, maybe later, and my mum was out of town. So I get off the school bus at around 3 p.m, and I immediately go upstairs to my room to continue binging House. Around 4 p.m, I notice a noise coming from below in my parents' bedroom. I quickly wrote it off as our cats. However, the noise persisted and got louder. So around 4:30, I sat up in bed and listened. It sounded like someone was throwing things, breaking things, and tearing through things. I just sat in fear. I couldn't move. For the next half hour, I listened and it got so loud. I got off my bed and quietly rested my feet on the floor tiling. I could feel it. I could feel vibrations coming from under my feet. The noise was so loud. You may be thinking, why didn't you call someone? Well, I didn't get a cell phone until a few months after this, and we no longer had a landline. I stood still for the next half hour, and I didn't know what to do. At this point, it was around 5:30ish, and I was crying because I was so scared. At this point, the noise was so loud that it was hurting my ears. But then, the noise suddenly stopped. Out of nowhere, just stopped. And this scared me more, because whatever was down there had nowhere to go but up. I had no way to defend myself. I literally found a dinner plate and a wooden drumstick for a drum set, in my room, so I was holding those in my hands. Man, was I shaking. I was listening and waiting to hear something, and I swear I could hear someone creeping up the stairs. I heard the step creak, and I threw the plate in the hallway, and one of my cats walked into the room. Now I know the creeping up the stairs could not have been her. All of our cats run up and down the stairs, and you can hear that, and there's a difference between the way it sounds. And then, nothing happens. I stood there shaking and crying for the next half hour, and I heard the front door at around 6, and my twin announced she was home. I ran downstairs in tears. She was so confused, and I tried to tell her, but I was so worked up and crying so much I couldn't explain it well enough. I said, "Look with me, please," and we walked across the living room to the entrance of my parents' bedroom. I turned the light on, and to my surprise, absolutely everything was in place. To this day, I'm really anxious about being in the house by myself. I'm glad I don't live there anymore. After the bank took our house, we all kind of parted ways, and then my parents divorced, which was really a good thing, as they're best friends now. And I'm not sure if I should warn the new owners about that house. First, my mum claims to be sensitive to ghosts. She's definitely had some weird experiences. And I often lived in houses that she believed were haunted, which on occasion was corroborated by my skeptical dad. Besides just spooky feelings in certain places, the most I've ever physically experienced was at one house where I would constantly see shit moving out of the corner of my eye, from the living room to the couch into the kitchen. Anyway, now I live in an 100-year-old house with my girlfriend. Out of the 5 or 6 houses that I've lived in that were supposedly haunted in some way, this is the only one that I've had experiences that I believe might qualify. First was just the experience of seeing things move on the periphery of the right side of my vision, from my couch, same couch actually, to my kitchen. It's weird, but it's not enough to stamp the haunted label on it. My other 2 experiences were a little weirder. After a few months of this happening every once in a while, I finally saw something different. I was up alone late at night, and I swear I got the same peripherals as usual, but on the left side. From there it grew into a large flowing shadow that moved upwards and took up about 1/4 of my vision. I looked over to see it for just a second before it disappeared. So weird, visuals, but nothing that proves ghosts. The last experience doesn't matter either, but it was definitely creepy. Again, I was up at around 2 or 3 a.m. playing some Madden. I had been up alone for a few hours at that point, with nothing incredible. Out of nowhere, the hairs start standing up on my arm and on the back of my neck. A weird sensation overcomes me, but whatever. I'm probably just being paranoid, and it starts getting worse. Then I get the feeling that someone else is in the room with me. It's not like a thought that someone is, but more like you can feel a slight pressure change on your skin when someone else is around. Definitely creepy, but nothing to be too alarmed over. That's when I feel like whatever it is right in front of me. Right after that, I feel 2 short gusts of air directly on my face, just like breaths. My house doesn't get drafty in the direction towards my face, especially when all the windows are closed. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was creepy, and after the breaths, the feeling of air went back to normal. This all happened maybe 6 to 8 months ago. My upstairs neighbour, as the house is split into 2 units, left a few months back and warned us that she had taken down her sage and candles to be aware of what was in the house. She's the daughter of the landlord and had been living there for years. I don't know if it's a ghost or something more obviously explainable, but it's definitely the creepiest house that I've lived in, with a supposedly long line of hauntings. My family and I moved into this big house in 2011 that was built in the 1930s. There were many creepy things that happened. The first few nights we moved in, I was in bed and had this weird paranoid feeling that someone was watching me from the corner of my room. I had the covers of the blankets over my face in case I saw something. When my sister was in her room, she could smell an old woman's perfume, a perfume that no one in the family wore. One night, My dad was alone and could hear creaking upstairs as it was a wooden floor, and no one was in the house except for him. We had dogs, but they were downstairs sitting on the sofa. My other sister also found a burnt rosary behind the radiator in her room, and when my first sister was painting the walls in her room, she had her back turned to the door, and when she turned, she saw a black shadow figure move past the doorway. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs. My first sister usually went to her boyfriend's place, so me and my other sister slept upstairs as my parents had a bedroom downstairs. Basically, the bathroom at the very end of the hall, and next to the bathroom was my sister's. Basically, the bathroom was at the very end of the hall, and next to the bathroom was my sister's room. But it was at a slight corner, not exactly right next to the bathroom, and every time I had to go pee, I had to cover my face in case I saw something in my sister's room, as she usually kept the door open, and I always got this weird feeling that someone was watching me, and I always ended up running past. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I personally really did and thought the stories were really cool. Anyway, if you do have time and are into Harry Potter wizarding stuff, it would really mean a lot to me again if you would check out my channel. The little card thingy with the logo will be appearing soon on screen, so just click that or look in the description. Again, really means a lot. Thank you. If you like the video, please don't forget to drop a like and a comment with your thoughts, as it really means a lot to me personally and helps the video get seen by others. If you liked it, why not share it? Sharing is caring, or so they say. Don't forget, I do post every night, so be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be notified every single time I post. And I'm sure you all want to do that. If there's a story that you wish to submit, feel free to share it to my Reddit, or alternatively, post it to my email. Now don't forget that we have a brand new Discord server, something you'll also find in the description, which you could join for loads of fun. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.